show you how to make something I call my whole grain mix, which I add to virtually all of my crackers. It's grains left whole, and they have a shelf life of about a year, so you won't need to mix them up very often. They add a great deal of delicious flavor, quite a bit of texture that makes them even more appealing, a visual pop, and more nutrition as well. I've just come back from the grocery store where I've bought the 4 basic grains you'll want to put into your whole grain mix. These are quinoa, buckwheat, millet, and amaranth. Most grocery stores will have them. If not, just check my website where I've listed many places you can find them. This is quinoa, spelled Quinoa. It is chock full of protein. According to the National Academy of Sciences, it's one of the best sources of protein you could possibly get from a plant. It's also full of fiber and other great nutrition. This whole grain is amaranth, and like quinoa, it's also a super grain because it has an incredibly high-quality protein, as well as fiber, calcium, phosphorus, iron, and vitamins E and B. This one looks a little different. It's buckwheat, and despite the word wheat, it's not related to wheat at all. It's more closely related to a flowering plant similar to rhubarb. Like quinoa and amaranth, it's also high in protein, as well as iron, phosphorus, potassium, and vitamins B and E. This beautiful yellow grain is millet, and like the other grains, it's also a good source of protein, as well as iron, phosphorus, manganese, and copper. I've shown you the basic 4 whole grains in the whole grain mix. Now I'm going to show you an additional few, which will greatly enhance the color, appearance, and texture of your chips and crackers. Here's something a little different. This is Israeli couscous, which is not an unmilled whole grain, but a roasted hard wheat that tastes like pasta. I sometimes add it to make the whole grain mix more fun and interesting, or you could add some whole wheat couscous. Here's another way to spice up your mix. I showed you standard quinoa earlier, the light-colored grain you see at the top. If you can find red or black quinoa as well, that will put a party dress on your chips and crackers. Now let's make our basic whole grain mix with the 4 ingredients. First, millet, quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, and now I'm going to stir them together. Now let's add the optional 3 ingredients that I showed you earlier. The black quinoa, the red quinoa, and the Israeli couscous. Check it out. This mix is one of the reasons you can't buy a cracker like this anywhere. So how large a batch of whole grain mix should you make? Here's how you answer that question. I use a 1/4 cup or less per batch of crackers, and I store them in a sealed container. So, a 32-ounce, 8-cup container will make up to 32 batches of crackers. And again, remember to keep it in a sealed container, and then your mix will have a 1-year shelf life. I haven't said anything about the proportions to use. You could certainly use equal amounts, as I've just shown you, of the 7 basic grains. Or you could just use a few, or even just one of them. Here's a couple of suggestions that I have based on the hundreds, well, thousands of batches of crackers that I've made in the past. You might consider using half millet because it's a beautiful golden color and it's inexpensive. You might want to start out with a little less buckwheat or Israeli couscous because their larger grain size makes it slightly harder to tip the batter around to spread it. My book, Crunch, Whole Grain Artisan Chips and Crackers, has scores of recipes. The recipes for my chips and crackers differ in the dozens of kinds of flour, spices, seeds, nuts, and other ingredients they use. But what all of these recipes share is that they each use up to a quarter cup of this whole grain mix that I've just shown you how to make. Your homemade chips and crackers are going to be far tastier, healthier, and more beautiful than anything you could ever buy in a store.